presentation. So there we go. So we are recording the presentation just so that others in the future will get this information hopefully. But we wanted to do this because we realized that one, there's always a lot of questions on transfer in general, and especially from parents. And we have done this in the past with parents, but it's been quite a while. And I know Macy had the idea of let's do this, let's incorporate the parents. We are sure that you have a ton of questions, and we also want to just provide you information on how you can support your student through this process, and kind of encourage them and help them along the way. So we are glad that you're definitely here. Some of y'all may have also seen that we will have a Spanish one session tomorrow. So also if you know anyone, that may be interested, it is the same link. But we're if you have any questions, definitely put them in the chat. You are welcome to unmute yourselves as well. And then, as was mentioned by Jordan and Ashley, we do have some questions too about, early welcome, registration, getting to SEC, anything like that. Definitely feel free to reach out to them. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I just want to provide a little information about our center. We are here to essentially help the students with that transfer process. Now, we do have our counseling department, and we work really closely with our counselors, such as Macy, to help students understand their education plan, which is, a plan of coursework, which Macy will talk a little bit more in depth about a little later. And then our transfer center kind of steps in to help with a lot of those other gaps in the transfer process. So we help with university research. For example, we get students who sometimes come and say, I want to get to Harvard. What is that requirement? What's the process? What do I need to do? So we can help with those type of things. We also advise through that transfer process. We have different universities that come and visit our campus and set up appointments. For example, we had Grand Canyon University here today. We've had Berkeley at UCLA, other folks come through. We help and support with the personal statements or the personal insight questions for the UCs, so we can help edit, review those, look through those. A big one is actually helping with the application. There's always a lot of little nuances and things with applications, so we want to make sure that's done correctly. Provide college fairs twice a year. We are kind of the hub for the guarantee programs and information. And then obviously we do celebrate our students. We just had our transfer celebration last week to celebrate those that are transferring and out. So that's a little bit about what we do, so you just have an idea. Next slide, please. So one thing I also wanted to provide, some of you who came to Early Welcome, you might have seen some of this information, but I want to provide just a little more information about transfers. So, a lot of UCs, Cal States, other schools, they do accept transfers, and the UCs and Cal States do accept quite a few number of transfers. On the Cal State side, about half of graduates started at a community college. On the UC side, about 1/3 of graduates started at a community college. So, it is very common coming to community college and then going to transfer to those institutions. One of the big things and why students may choose community college is, as you can see, some of the transfer statistics. So, UC, for example, if you look at the freshman versus transfer rate, you'll see that it is much higher at many other institutions with regard to the admissions rate to transfer institutions. And then I also pulled up some data. I was looking at some of our numbers recently, and you can see that we actually do really well here with our admit rates as well to the UCs. So, we are definitely doing well with our students, supporting our students as best as we can. And a lot of students choose to go to community college to either A, cheaper option, B, kind of reset and get to where they want to go to, or C, just, take another shot at their dream school as well. Next slide. And then a little bit of our top transfer destinations. So within that 5-year kind of time period, those are a lot of the schools just by volume or total numbers of where our students are going to. As you can see, it's a lot of the local schools, yes, a lot of students are range bound, don't want to go too far. But you can see we do have some of our big name schools like UCLA. We get a lot of transfers there. Our local UC, Irvine, our most local private school, Chapman University. But on the right hand side, we also have some of the schools that I've seen students getting into. So, we definitely have had students who get admitted to Cornell and Duke and our Pomona colleges. This year, I've seen a student get accepted to Pomona College, which is a pretty prestigious liberal arts school. I have a student accepted to University of Michigan. Another student got accepted to Columbia University in New York. So students definitely can go anywhere, everywhere that accepts transfers. Occasionally, you have some schools that don't accept transfers or they're very limited, but I've seen the gamut, and we also help students go. I mean, I've even helped students go internationally to schools in Europe and Canada and places like that. So that's how we support our students. So I wanted to give you a little bit about that background, that information, that data, so that you're aware. And then pretty much from here on out, I'll have Macy talk a little bit about transfer and how get some information on how you can support your students as well.
All right. So again, thank you all for being here on an evening. I know evening times are super busy. I've got my two little ones, one's screaming at the top of his lungs in case you can hear that. Sorry in advance. But we really appreciate you. And we have the recording in case anything comes up, and we'll be able to send that out as well. But I want to go over some basics. We'll get in a little bit to the weeds with some of the topics, but this really is just meant to be kind of an overview to equip you with some knowledge, some information, and some ways that you can support your students as they are either thinking about coming to SCC or as they start maybe in the fall, or even if they've been with us for a bit and they're going to be navigating the transfer process soon. One thing I would love to see, if anybody has any specific questions, like burning questions that made you show up tonight at 6:30 on a Tuesday, that you're like, I really want to get that question answered, go ahead and throw them in the chat. That way, I can either address them, if there are things that I already know are going to be in the presentation, that's fantastic. And then if there are things that we don't already have planned to talk about, we can try to either incorporate them into the presentation, or maybe Miguel and I can kind of tackle them in the chat as well. But I'd love to see kind of any of those burning questions, or just kind of what brought you here today and what you're hoping to get out of it. That's really helpful for us. But let's go to some real basics. University transfer. What do we even mean when we talk about that? So when we throw out the word transfer at SCC, we're really talking about the process of coming and starting with us at the community college, completing requirements, and transferring to a university. So to get a bachelor's degree. Now, there are going to be some students that come to SCC who apply to maybe a associate's degree in nursing program, or maybe they're going into some other like allied health, sonography, or they're just taking classes with us and then starting in a different program. So that's not so much the like traditional transfer process. That's, completion of prerequisites. So we think of transfer as that process of going from the community college into the next step of getting the bachelor's degree from a university. And students can transfer to a bunch of places. They can go to a UC, University of California. They can go to a Cal State University, also called the CSUs. They can go to private universities, both in-state, out-of-state, and also just generally out-of-state universities as well, as like state schools, ASU, all across the country. Miguel already highlighted some of those places that students have been admitted to. So it's really like the sky's the limit when students come to community college in terms of where they can transfer. And as Miguel already talked about, those rates of admission are better as a transfer student, which really provides so many opportunities, which is fantastic. And I think one thing that I'm constantly kind of myth busting when I'm working with my students and working with the parents of students is, what are students doing when they come to SCC? And a lot of times I hear my students come in and they say, I just want to take my general ed and then I want to transfer. Well, guess what? That's not all you're doing with us, because when you come to SCC, you do a combination of general education and then also the foundational courses in the major, which is the same as what a student would do if they were admitted, starting as a freshman at Cal State Fullerton or as a freshman at UC Irvine. They're not just taking general education, they are taking classes, core classes in their major that set them up to be able to be taking upper division in their major when they're at the junior level. So what's really important with that is we get a lot of students who want to get done in 2 years. And so choosing a major is an important process that has to come kind of early. So encouraging that exploration and encouraging students to start thinking about it. It doesn't necessarily need to be, like freshman year of high school. Like they have time, of course, but once they do come to SEC, we will be asking that question of, well, what are you thinking of studying? And that's something that we can support as well. We have career counseling, and in our individual appointments with students, we can definitely help kind of think through what major might be the right fit. But ultimately, when they're here, it's mimicking what they would do at a university with both general ed and those foundational courses. So we kind of wanted to bookend this presentation with thinking of you all, the parents, the family members, maybe godparents, friends, grandparents, whatever your relationship is to the student, or students themselves are obviously welcome to be here too. We wanted to kind of think through some ways for you specifically, some strategies, some things that you can be doing to support students along their transfer journey. And we're going to get into, programs and transfer requirements, all of that. But I wanted to start out by thinking through, like, what are the ways that you can show up for your students and help them out in this, despite them being in the driver's seat of taking the classes now that they're going to be in college. So starting out, one is definitely encouraging and helping students explore their transfer options. So just seeing what's out there. I feel like a lot of students, they might not know what their options are, or maybe they're just haven't thought about it too much. Perhaps they know just the local schools, like, oh, I've heard of Cal State Fullerton, or I've heard of UC Irvine, but what else is out there? And does that school actually have your major? And maybe there's a really unique major that's offered at a school that's a little bit more far away. Is that an option? Is it not? Just kind of having those conversations as well. And then I think a really, really important part, especially for our new students, is helping students find that balance between their academics, work, and personal responsibilities. I mean, coming to college, that's a huge transition. And I like to think that coming to community college is a little bit easier of a transition than going straight to a university. I know that for me, when I went to community college, that was much easier than had I gone straight to a university. It, that something about that balance and being able to explore and going to the local school for me just give me a little bit more space. But regardless, it still takes some transition, especially if the student is navigating a lot outside of the academics, whether that be work or maybe helping care for a family member. So helping them kind of strike a balance and maybe understanding that they won't be able to be present for every single birthday party or, whatever it may be. So thinking through, like, how can you take a role in allowing the student to thrive by having that balance. The next piece is when it comes to the actual application time, it's a stressful process. It's a confusing process, especially if a student hasn't navigated it in high school before. Of course, myself, Miguel, the transfer team overall, we are so here to support with that. But the emotional support that you can provide, that validation, encouragement is really helpful as well. And then also just encouraging for them to use resources like our Transfer Success Center. We do workshops, we do appointments, and you know, one I actually was working with a student like just yesterday who is 2 years into their education here, and it was their first time sitting down with a counselor. It's like, oh no, like, how are you not in our office before that? So we want to avoid that. So definitely encouraging them to utilize the Transfer Success Center workshops and appointments for the actual application process. And then even on the forefront ahead of that, definitely having them meet with a counselor, getting their 2 year or 3 year roadmap of classes, or more than 3 years, however long they're going to spend with us, getting that mapped out, having those conversations around the major, but just kind of encouraging them to come see us basically and use the resources in addition to the plenty of other resources we have like tutoring and et cetera. And then also just little nudges, little reminders about those deadlines. I don't know how Miguel feels about this, but I think one of the hardest conversations is that student who comes in on, I don't know, say December 15th when the application closed on November 30th, and they say, I'm super excited to transfer. How does the process work? And it's like, you're 2 weeks off. We just had the applications close. So, there's a lot of deadlines. It can be a little bit confusing, but we're going to give you an overview of that process. So hopefully you'll have a little bit of information on that as well. And um, also just even once they apply, there's a lot of deadlines and follow-ups to the application that they have to meet. So just encouraging them like, hey, have you been checking your email lately? Obviously, we want them to be thriving independently and everything, but just getting through that process can be really confusing. So just if you can be kind of the cheerleader helping out with that, that can be really helpful. And then also during the transfer transition, obviously celebrating their success and new beginnings. I know everyone would be doing that regardless. But thinking of that, again, it is a big transition. Even if they're only going to like a local school that they're not necessarily going to be doing some big move, like maybe they'll continue to live at home or something. That change from the community college to the university level can come with a lot of change. So for example, here at SEC, we're on the semester system. So if they go to UC Irvine, that's quarter, the pace is completely different. And so that can be a really, really big change for a student. And then on top of that, no matter where they transfer to, now they're going to be taking upper division level courses in their major, which means that coursework is going to be more rigorous. And so along that, with that comes with, again, kind of striking that balance between the academics, work, and personal responsibilities. So some transfer basics. When students come to SCC, like I mentioned, they do general education classes in their major. Those things together need to be, you need to have 60 units, 60 transferable units to go to either a Cal State or to a UC. When it comes to private schools, when it comes to out-of-state schools, the 60 unit piece can vary a little bit. However, the rule of thumb, because most students want to apply broadly to maybe a handful of schools that include private and public schools. So we're having them take 60 transferable units. For their general education, in terms of meeting minimum eligibility, for the UC system, that's called the 7-course pattern. So it's basically 2 kind of English types of classes, a math class, and then 4 additional general education classes. And then for the Cal States, they have what's called the Golden 4. So that's, again, those 2 English classes, the math, and for them, it's a super important communications class. So that's the bare minimum. We have a lot more general education. So when students come in, especially if they're coming in the fall, they'll be following what we call the CalGETC pattern, which is just basically a pattern of classes with these different areas, arts, humanities, math, where they're fulfilling requirements. Now, IGETC might be required by certain schools for a particular major, but in general, the minimum general education is a little bit less than that. So again, 7-course pattern for the UCs, and then Cal States would be the Golden 4, will be those core classes that they have to have. And then on top of that, they need to have major prep. So that's also called lower division, major preparation. Again, that's that foundational. We call it we like to use all sorts of jargon in education. But basically those foundational classes in the major. And the way that students can understand what those classes are is for Cal States and UCs, and even a couple private California colleges now, they can use a website called assist.org. We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. But that shows you basically what those foundational courses are for the major at those schools. And then for students who are transferring to a Cal State university, they also could follow the associate degree for transfer in their major if we have we don't have a degree in every single major possible. So that is one that we definitely navigate kind of on a one-by-one basis with students of figuring out whether or not they're following an associate's degree for transfer. So between those things, 60 units, and if they're missing anything, like they do all the general ed and all the major prep and they're at 50 units, then they take 10 units of transferable elective credit. And then on top of those core courses, students also need to meet minimum GPAs. So for the UCs, it's a 2.4 GPA or a 2.8 for non-residents. And then for Cal State's overall, it's a 2.0. However, certain majors and campuses can and absolutely do require a higher GPA. Like UCLA, I think their overall minimum is a 3.0, and then there's certain majors where like that's also not going to cut it, right? So individual schools can kind of dictate that GPA piece either just as a campus wide or per major, it just depends on the school. But overall, 2.4, 2.0. Miguel and I like to see students landing at least a 3.0 to have, a good amount of options available to them, especially if they're thinking of transferring maybe to our local Cal State Fullerton. If they have a 3.0, they're in a good spot. So that's like where we like to encourage students, unless they're trying to go to UCLA, then obviously we want a little higher GPA than that. And we'll talk about also TAG in a minute, which has also different GPA requirements. Articulation agreements. So I wanted to put this slide on here and have it be its own slide because, again, this is very much that college jargon. So articulation agreement is basically a partnership that we have, partnerships or agreements that we have between Cal States, UC, CSUs, private schools that basically ensure that we know how the credits will transfer because it's pre-agreed that it's, how the courses will go. And so we have articulation agreements with every single UC, with every single Cal State, and then we also have them with certain private and out-of-state schools. And we do have a detailed list on our articulation website. So that's sccollege.edu/articulation. And so this little screenshot is assist.org. So this is a public facing website. It's not just something that only counselors can use. So I would encourage you to, explore this or encourage your student to explore this because it's really, really helpful information. I think I heard someone taking themselves off mute. Was there a question? Or maybe it was a accidental. That's okay too. So how do you explore transfer options? Our Transfer Success Center offers campus tours, so definitely encouraging students to do that when they're available. Of course, it's limited to, we don't tour every single campus across the nation, but there you can also do independent tours, getting scheduled with those. And a lot of schools, especially after COVID, have really fantastic virtual tours as well. So definitely capitalizing on what they've built out because of the technology and, and the limitations we had during COVID. Now they're pretty solid options, although I think they're not quite the same, right? Like going on campus and really getting a sense of, okay, there's students all around. I think the best time to do a campus tour from personal experience is when the students are there. I remember when I was in community college and I went and toured a few UCs, it was during summer break and it was like ghost town at the time that I went, and it just really didn't give the exact sense. So the difficulty is that the students probably also in class. So always easier said than done, but if you can, definitely getting a campus tour can help a student get a sense of what that, if it feels like the right fit or not. And then things that you should definitely be researching is number one, majors offered. This is something I see all the time. Students come in and they say, hey, I want to go to UCI as a communications major. And I say, you could go to UCI, but not as a communications major because they don't have that major. So let's talk about what you're interested in, and does it need to be that major? Or can we pivot, or like, do we need to find majors that have that or schools that have that one offered? So transferbound.com is a really fantastic website for doing some preliminary research. It has like all the Cal States, all the UCs on one site, and you can search by major. And it also searches by category, which is really helpful for when you're just exploring, because there's a lot of majors that you might not even know exist, new majors, things that have come out in the last few years or just are kind of like really specific to that campus. So TransferBound is really helpful for seeing what's out there. And then also, if you have a really specific school in mind, you can go directly onto that university website. I do this all the time with students. Google name UCI list of majors, and then they always have a thing, whether it's in their catalog or a separate website that has their list of majors, and you can just explore and click around and see what the types of classes that they would be doing as upper division. That really gives some insight into what the major would look like. And of course, I nerd out about that, but to me, that part is so fun and just getting to see what's out there and what's available. And they can always, always, always come in and to see a counselor or to see the transfer center, and we can help with that exploration as well. Definitely exploring cost of attendance, regardless of if it's private, public, whatever it may be, just seeing what does that look like, what's doable for your family. A lot of the private schools will have like these cost and aid estimators that you can use to kind of get a sense of, based on your family's income, what could you potentially anticipate. And one resource, I think I have it in a later slide, but I'm going to hit on it just now so I don't forget, is if your student is interested in out-of-state transfer, I would definitely make sure that you're taking a look at the WUI, Western Undergraduate Exchange website. So it's basically a tuition savings program for schools on it's not West Coast, but like West half of the United States. And so, for example, instead of paying 200% of in-state tuition, maybe the student pays 150%, et cetera. So that's something that you can check out if the student's interested in out-of-state transfer, but you're like a little bit nervous around the price tag, because it can get pretty pricey for out-of-state transfer. Also, of course, researching transfer requirements. So, okay, you're interested in this school. What would it look like? Are you interested in taking those classes? Does it feel like a right fit? What is the GPA required, et cetera? And then also looking up any transfer programs that are available. And we'll talk a bit about some of those as well. And then super important, I am a counselor, I got to plug counseling, but students should absolutely be meeting with an SCC counselor for what we call a comprehensive education plan. Basically, it's just their 2-year or more roadmap of their classes, mapped out like every single thing that you need to take while you're at SCC to know. And it's based on, a student could come in and tell me 5 different schools, and my plan is going to reflect, making it perfect for all those different schools, for the majors. Maybe it's even 2 different majors and 5 different schools, right? So we have a fun time making those. It's like a fun puzzle that we get to do together. But that is something that students should be doing early as they can, as early as they know their major, ideally in the first semester, if not by the second semester at the latest. Okay, we have in the chat. Oh, that was just Miguel being awesome and putting the WUI link in there. Thanks, Miguel. So let's talk about some of the programs. So we're going to start with the Cal States. So CSU campuses. I put on this map because I just wanted to highlight that there are so many Cal States. I mean, our local one in our backyard would be Cal State Fullerton, but there are really so many going all the way up. The most southern would be San Diego or San Diego State University, and all the way to Humboldt, which is now rebranded as Cal Poly Humboldt. So there are really a lot of options. And in terms of programs or pathways to get to these schools, the first is the associate degree for transfer, which I really briefly mentioned when I was talking about those minimum requirements. So the associate degree for transfers are basically an associate's degree that a student would follow at SCC, so either an Associate of Arts for transfer, an Associate of Science for transfer. We offer them in specific, very common majors: psychology, business, bio, communication studies. There's more, I'm not going to list them all. But basically, they follow that degree, and it allows them to meet the transfer requirements for multiple Cal State universities, as opposed to like trying to kind of puzzle piece again, like I was mentioning, although we still puzzle piece even with the associate degree for transfer. And we're happy to, and we enjoy that work. One of the benefits is, aside from having basically one path of classes, one clear kind of cut path of classes to follow, is that when they have an associate degree for transfer, the students actually get guaranteed admission into the Cal State University system. So it's not guaranteed admission into a specific school, but it's admission into the system. So let me give you an example. A student is a psychology major. They apply to Cal State Fullerton, Cal State Long Beach, Cal Poly Pomona, and they end up not getting in anywhere. If they have the associate's degree for transfer, that means that their application will actually be rerouted to a school that has space in that major for them. Now, is it going to be a school that they wanted to go to? Can't promise that. It might be Fresno, like it could be somewhere that's a bit far away. So we do recommend that students apply broadly to all the schools that they're interested in, but it is a guarantee into the system. So that is a nice backup. And then also for those local schools that are impacted, or impacted is a fancy word for basically we get too many applicants, we can't take everybody. So like Cal State Fullerton, Cal State Long Beach, they're impacted across the board for all majors. Cal Poly Pomona is impacted for certain majors. So that's what we mean when we say impacted. But so for those local schools that are competitive because of impaction, the associate degree for transfer can also be great because they get a 0.1 GPA bump for admission consideration. So instead of having a 2.8, they could be looked at as if they had a 2.9, and that can make a world of difference. So for certain students, depending on the major, depending on their goals, the associate degree for transfer can be a really good fit. And a counselor will absolutely work with the student to figure out whether or not it would be a good fit. The next thing is the Transfer Success Pathway Program. This is a newer program. It's also referred to as CSU Dual Admission. For anybody in this space, if you have a student who is starting in the fall, we have got to get them to sign up for the Transfer Success Pathway Program, because this is basically, well, it's only available to students right at the beginning of their education. So in that first semester, the application cycle is August 1st to October 31st, so pretty early. And basically they start at SEC and they get they enter into an agreement where they'll be guaranteed admission into a specific Cal State and a specific major. So the associate degree for transfer that I just talked about, again, that's a guarantee into the system, but not a specific school. Whereas TSP is actually a guarantee into a specific school for a specific major. So they do the application online August 1st to October 31st of their first semester. In the fall. This is only for new students. If they've already been at SEC, this would not apply if they didn't, they would not be eligible if they did not already apply in the past. But basically, students enter into an admissions guarantee, and there's going to be specific requirements they have to meet. So for example, there's going to be a specific GPA, classes that they have to complete, and it all has to be done within 3 years. But as long as they maintain and meet those eligibility criteria, they are going to be guaranteed that spot at the Cal State. So that's a really fantastic opportunity. And there's a lot of gray area with this one. Again, they're doing it so early into their education. Maybe their goals might change. This does not force them to do anything. This does not force them to go to that school in that major. They can absolutely change where they want to go. They can change their major. If they change their major, it's up to that school to decide whether or not they'll allow the agreement to stand, or like the guarantee to stand. So that's kind of on a case-by-case basis. But for the students, even if they're completely undecided, at least like locking them into something so that they have that option is what we really, really recommend. And then lastly, we wanted to just kind of mention for Cal State Fullerton, the Cal States give basically, I don't know how to describe it that well, but it's kind of like a priority, admission priority based on local area. So it's called local area preference. And this is something that all Cal States do. It's part of their mission. They have to do it. But for Cal State Fullerton, any student who is coming to SCC and is going to take a majority of their units from us, they're going to be considered a local area student for Cal State Fullerton, and basically they'll have a stronger chance of getting in than a student who is considered non-local. Okay, a lot of information in there. UCs. So I want to just take a pause because I wanted to highlight a little bit of a difference between the UCs and the Cal States. So the UCs are research institutions. There's not quite as many campuses. I actually regret not putting a map on here. We'll have to make that change for for next year. But for the UCs, they're research institutions. So the mission of the UC is a little bit different than the mission of the Cal States. The Cal States are all about bachelor's degrees for everybody who wants them, essentially, for the, educating the state of California with the bachelor's degree level. And UC's is the big part of their mission is creating the like cutting edge research in all the different disciplines. So that's where you see all the PhD, like doctorate degree programs are in UC's. And then at the bachelor's degree level, it's just going to be in certain majors, it's going to probably be a bit more theoretical than like practice oriented. And so because of that, some majors are just not offered at the UCs, for example, and vice versa. There's going to be certain majors that the UCs have that the Cal States don't have. But majors like kinesiology, communication, kinesiology, you just across the board are not going to find that in a UC. Communication, it's only going to be a couple UCs. So that's just an important difference. There's also some things like price differences, but I feel like the mission difference is more important to highlight because there's more of a kind of misunderstanding of that than the price tag is a little bit more clear cut. So in terms of pathways to the UCs have an amazing program called the Transfer Admission Guarantee, or TAG. Earlier, I said tag without explaining what that was, and I instantly felt bad, but I had to keep moving or else I was going to cover too much of what this slide says. So again, we love our acronyms, we love our jargon, but TAG is a guaranteed way to get into a UC. So students apply for TAG pretty much like a year before they go. So for example, if they wanted to start in the fall of 2026 at a UC, they would be actually applying this upcoming September of 2025. So pretty much a year in advance. It's a free online application that they do in addition to the UC application, which they pay an application fee for. But TAG itself is a free program. So when a student enters in with a transfer admission guarantee, it works really similar to like the TSP program that I just talked about for the Cal State, except they're not having to do it right away. They get to do it a little bit later, which is great because then they probably have a much clearer sense of exactly where they want to go. There are very specific requirements for TAG, so they should absolutely be working with a counselor to ensure that they meet these eligibility requirements. There's going to be certain GPA, things around units, specific classes. For example, UC Irvine offers a transfer admission guarantee, and the GPA is having a 3.4 by the time that they do their TAG application. The schools that do not participate in TAG would be UCLA, UC Berkeley, and UC San Diego. The three most competitive UCs are not able to participate in this. And then at the other schools, there's going to be certain majors that don't participate. For example, at UC Irvine, their computer science and their business administration majors do not participate in TAG, but there's a ton of majors that do. So this program is so amazing. So students can get a transfer admission guarantee to one school and have that guaranteed path, which is really fantastic. And then for students whose dream school is UCLA and we don't have a TAG, we do have our UCLA Transfer Alliance program. So that's when students participate in and complete our honors program. They can be part of Transfer Alliance, which again, acronym TAP is what that one's called. And basically they can have priority admission for majors in the college. And they also get to put a backup major, which is called an alternate major. And then for UCI, they also have honors to honors, which is similar. So priority admission, and then they have some merit-based scholarships they can be considered for. So these are really fantastic programs if a student especially is like aiming at these competitive, super competitive majors at the UCs. Our honors program is really something that should definitely be considered. And then for private and out-of-state universities, we also have some pathways and programs. So AICCU is basically a group of private colleges in the state of California. It's not every single private school, but it's a big chunk of them participate in this ADT commitment program, where basically they do the same thing that the Cal States do with the ADT, where they offer like guaranteed admission and junior level standing for ADT applicants. It's going to be for specific majors at specific colleges, but they do open that up to students, which is great. And then ASU, we have a partnership with, so direct transfer guarantee, and then a little bit more of a simplified application. And then also HBCUs, which is historically Black colleges and universities, have some pathways and admission guarantees as well. So we can definitely work with the students to kind of help explore some of those options and see what's out there. Financial support. So at SCC, we have our financial aid office. Every student should be applying for financial aid. So that's through either the FAFSA or the California Dream Act application. We have our SCC Promise Scholarship for new students, and that is for students who qualify for financial aid. This is money on top. And then for students who don't qualify for financial aid, maybe you're in family income is too high, this is a reimbursement and you do get some money back, which is great. And then we also have our SEC scholarships, which students, it opens up every year. And even in a student's last year, right before they're going to transfer, they should be applying for scholarships, because we have some that are designed for transfer students. And so every year there are scholarships that sometimes, qualified students don't apply for. So really, really recommend looking out for that deadline. It's typically March, I think. Thank you, Miguel, for nodding your head. It's somewhere in like mid to late March, tends to be the deadline for that one. So just be on the lookout for that. And then university programs. So of course, there's going to be college specific scholarships. I already mentioned the WUI Western Undergraduate Exchange that Miguel linked into the chat. And then there's also an amazing program called the UC Blue and Gold Opportunity Program, where basically if the family income is 80,000 or less, they pretty much guarantee that the tuition will be covered through covered in whether it be grants, scholarships, some kind of combination. So that is really huge. And then I already mentioned as well, for private college, they do have aid calculators. Private schools have very high price tags, but they do tend to have a lot of grant and scholarship money available to students to help offset that cost. And so I do encourage you to kind of explore that and not immediately take it off the table. When in doubt, like, let them tell you how much money they're gonna give, and then make decisions from there. And then again, like I mentioned in the beginning, kind of wanted to bookend this of like, where do you kind of support? So emotional support, so being their cheerleader through the challenges, being that resource for them to go to. And I appreciate you all being here today to kind of get the preview, get the overview, so that you can kind of put them towards the directions. Open communication, so asking questions without solving problems. Of course, they're in the driver's seat now as a college student, but helping kind of figure out where there might be some needs for resources or further research. And then encouraging self-advocacy, so helping the students navigate the system with increased independence. So again, like just encouraging them to come talk to us, to come ask questions. That is really, really helpful. So I kind of cruised through that because, man, this time is going by super quick. So I just want to open it up to Miguel to see if you had anything to add. And then, of course, we can open up to questions as well.
I did want to answer the question that came through about the other one in regard to income. So we're not, the 100% financial aid experts, but essentially, in my experience, or the general rule is that if a student is under 24 years old, they use their parents' income information on these financial aid applications. Now, even in situations, I've had students who are like, well, I'll have my own apartment, I pay my own bills, things like that. Typically, it still includes the parents' income. There are exceptions, there are ways to appeal and say you're independent, but typically a lot of the typical situations are student has been in the military, is a parent, so has a dependent, they are former foster youth, in certain situations, in that sense. But, again, that would be probably more for financial aid.
For that next question in the chat was for Cal State University transfer, can a student apply for a TAG or is there only TSP? So TAG is specifically a UC program. So there is not a TAG program for the Cal States. And so TSP is basically the only way that a student can get a guarantee into a particular Cal State and a particular major. Otherwise, there's the associate degree for transfer that has the guarantee into the system. But yeah, it's the TSP at the beginning, or just like an overall path into the Cal State system. Great question.
But I will add that as long as students really meeting with a counselor and planning ahead, they can have multiple guarantees, right? So they can have, for example, this transfer success pathway for the CSU. Then they can also work on the tag for the UC, right? They can also work on the associate degree for transfer for like Cal States or some of these private schools, and have like the Arizona State agreement. So it's possible kind of working it right to have 3, 4, even more guarantees, and none of these lock a student into the school. I know that's different for some like high school programs that are like the early decisions where you're kind of locked into a particular university. That's not the case for these particular programs.
And then
Um,
question
uh,
around TSP being 3 years. So it's they have 3 years to complete the requirements. So they could do it in 2. They could do it in less time, of course, but it does give them the cap of 3 years because they want the student to be on a full-time kind of track to be able to transfer. But there's certain majors that are really tough, that have a lot of requirements. Your engineering majors, for example, and getting that done in 2 years can sometimes be difficult depending on the individual student's circumstance. So that is that kind of factored in, of course, to the 3 years. And then one of the other questions was how many years is TAG? TAG does not have any kind of timestamp because, again, the student's not applying at the forefront. They're applying just like the year before they transfer, which is the same time that they're doing their regular transfer application. So students apply to transfer almost a whole year ahead. And then the tag is around that same time, just like a month, 2 months earlier than that. So there's no time frame, just some really specific. Yes,
I,
a student could take 10 years and do tag still.
yeah, yeah. So they can take. I have seen that for sure. So that's um, not a problem really. I know there's just yeah, there's no really kind of issues with regard to that. I did have another question that came through to me. It's someone's asking to explain the difference between regular and honors college courses at Santiago Canyon College and how they differ. They're kind of off the bat, it's not like honors in high school where, I mean, I had honors in high school and it felt like we were reading extra books and doing extra essays and kind of all this extra work. It's structured differently. They are capped, a lot of the honors classes at 20 students. They are more, they engage the students a bit more. There's probably a little bit more, discussion with regard to that. How the course is structured, how it's built. But it doesn't necessarily mean harder being in the honors course. They do build a community around, the honors program the students do. For example, I in transfer, I see a lot of honors students and they kind of, push each other to, apply, get to these specific schools, but it's not necessarily harder. Students can, coming out of high school, take an honors class. There is no longer a GPA requirement. Correct me if I'm wrong, Macy, with regard to that. And so they're encouraged to take an honors class to see how they feel about it. There are requirements, though, to finish the honors program, which is taking a certain amount of units.
And I think the main feedback that we hear about the honors is it just tends to be more like Socratic method, like dialogue based. So maybe coming to class with the expectation of having already read the reading assignment and then having a conversation as opposed to maybe like a lecture style. So to me, that's actually just more engaging. But it's not weighted, you know. Those APs and honors classes in high school can count differently in the GPA. A B in an honors class is just a B, so it's not gonna be working that way. We got a question in the chat around like the tag TSP. So just to recap, so students can apply for both tag and TSP, but the time frame is different. So TSP, which is the Cal State Transfer Success Pathway, that is done at the very, very beginning. So that will be like in September, starting in August, September through October, students will commit to an agreement or enter into an agreement for a guarantee to a Cal State for a specific major at a Cal State. Again, that's not forcing them to go there, but it's at least a guaranteed pathway. And then tag, that is not right at the beginning. That is like the year before they transfer. So let's talk about this as if it was a 2-year student. So TSP would be their very first semester, right at the beginning, they do their TSP agreement. Then the next year in September, they fill out the tag application. And then that same semester, October 1st, November 30th, they do their tag they do their UC application and their Cal State application. So there's lots of dates and deadlines. It can be really confusing, but basically a little bit different time frame of when a student would enter into those admission guarantee agreements, and they can do both, and neither of them force them to do anything. They just give them that opportunity. I hope that clarified.
So I will say that if your child or you or a student are coming here and starting here this particular fall, come see us in the transfer center, essentially within the first few weeks, and then that way we can help you get signed up for that particular TSP program.
Okay, it's 7:26, so we just want to honor everyone's time. We can definitely hang out for a couple more minutes in case there's any other questions, but we want to definitely thank you all so much for spending a little bit of your evening with us, and hope that you got a little bit more information on some of the requirements and policy and programs and opportunities that are out there. And the biggest takeaway is exactly what Miguel said a minute ago is come see us, encourage the students to come visit us early into their education so that we can create like a tailored support for them, right? Like we're meeting with a counselor, getting that 2-year roadmap, meeting with Miguel and our transfer team to get kind of more personalized, individualized guidance on what's a good fit and exploring opportunities. And then, of course, capitalizing on all the resources and workshops and things that we have in our campus college fairs that we have every year, every semester, I should say. So our website is actually on this slide, which is sccollege.edu/transfer. And we are located in the same location as counseling, which is D106. So don't be a stranger. Come see us, have your students come see us. And yeah, anything else, Miguel?
Nope, that is all.
Awesome. All right.